The Second Taiwan Strait Crisis, also called the 1958 Taiwan Strait Crisis, was a conflict that took place between the People's Republic of China and the Taiwan governments, in which the PRC shelled the islands of Kinmen and the nearby Matsu Islands along the east coast of the PRC in an attempt to drive away the ROC Army. Overview. The crisis started with the 823 artillery bombardment at 5:30 p.m. on August 23, 1958. When the PRC's People's Liberation Army began an intense artillery bombardment against Kinmen. The ROC troops on Kinmen dug in and then returned fire. In the heavy exchange of fire, roughly 2,500 ROC soldiers and 200 PRC soldiers were killed. This conflict was a continuation of the First Taiwan Strait Crisis, which had begun immediately after the Korean War was over. The nationalist Chinese had begun to build on the island of Kinmen and the nearby Matsu archipelago. During 1954, the PLA began firing artillery at both Kinmen and some of the nearby Matsu Islands. The American Eisenhower administration responded to the request for aid from the ROC according to its obligations in the Mutual Defense Treaty that had been ratified in 1954. President Dwight D. Eisenhower ordered the reinforcement of the U.S. Navy 7th Fleet in the area, and he ordered American naval vessels to help the nationalist Chinese government to protect the supply lines to the islands. Also, under a secret effort called Operation Black Magic, the U.S. Navy modified some of the F-86 Sabre fighter planes of the ROC Air Force with its newly developed AIM-9 Sidewinder air-to-air missiles. These missiles gave the nationalist Chinese pilots a decisive edge over the Soviet-made MiG-15 and MiG-17 fighters in the skies over the Matsu Islands and the Taiwan Strait. The ROC pilots used these Sidewinder missiles to gain air superiority over the PRC pilots. The U.S. Army's contribution was to reinforce the strategic air defense capability of the ROC. A provisional Nike battalion was organized at Fort Bliss, TX, and sent via USMTS General J. C. Breckinridge to Taiwan. The 2nd Missile Battalion was augmented with detachments of signal, ordnance and engineers, totaling some 704 personnel. Recent research from the U.S. National Archives and Records Administration also indicates that the U.S. Air Force was prepared for nuclear warfare against the PRC. 12 long-range 203 mm M115 howitzer artillery pieces and numerous 155 mm howitzers were transferred from U.S. Marine Corps to the Army of the ROC. These were sent west to Kinmen Island to gain superiority in the artillery duel back and forth over the straits there. The impact of these powerful artillery pieces led some members of the PLA to believe that American artillerymen had begun to use nuclear weapons against them. Soon, the Soviet Union dispatched its foreign minister, Andrei Gromyko, to Beijing to discuss the actions of the PLA and the Red Chinese Air Force, with advice of caution to the Red Chinese. On September 22, 1958, the Sidewinder missile was used for the first time in air-to-air combat as 32 nationalist Chinese F-86s clashed with 100 Red Chinese MiGs in a series of aerial engagements. Numerous MiGs were shot down by Sidewinders, the first kills to be scored by air-to-air missiles in combat. Soon, the PRC was faced with a stalemate. The PLA's artillerymen had run out of artillery shells. The Red Chinese government announced a large decrease in bombardment levels on October 6. Afterwards, both sides continued to bombard each other with shells containing propaganda leaflets on alternate days of the week. This strange and formal arrangement continued until the normalization of diplomatic relations between the United States and the PRC in 1979. The question of Matsu and Quemoy became an issue in the 1960 U.S. presidential election when Richard Nixon accused John F. Kennedy of being unwilling to commit to using nuclear weapons if the PRC invaded the nationalist outposts. The spent shell casings and fragments have become a recyclable resource for steel for the local economy. Since the Second Taiwan Strait Crisis, Kinmen has become famous for its production of meat cleavers made from bombshells. Citations: http://www.generals.dk/general/q_kwan/China.html. Ministry of National Defense ROC. U.S. Naval War College. http://cgsc.leavenworth.army.mil/carl/download/kpubs/bürger_hui.pdf